Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to explore some really compelling sources and uh, pull out those key insights for you.
That's right.
Today, we're taking a fascinating journey into Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Ah, a classic.
Definitely not just any book. It's widely seen as a spiritual cornerstone. You often see it on lists like spiritual books that changed the world.
Hmm.
And what's really captivating, I think, is how it manages to blend mysticism, science, and faith. It sounds like a strange mix, but he makes it work.
He really does. And the author himself, Paramahansa Yogananda, is central to this. He was an Indian yogi, a guru who played a massive role in bringing yoga and Eastern spirituality over to the West.
A huge influence.
Absolutely. So in this deep dive, we'll be looking at his life story, his teachings, and, the incredible impact this book, it's almost 500 pages, first published back in 1946, has had.
This still resonates today.
It really does. We want to give you a shortcut, sort of, to understanding why it keeps inspiring people from, serious spiritual seekers right through to cultural icons.
Okay, so let's get into it. Reading through it, the story of his life really pulls you in. It starts chronologically, his early life in Gorakhpur,
Right.
and it's marked by these, visions he had, things he calls miracles, and just this deep, deep desire for God realization.
An intense yearning, even as a child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the big shift, the real turning point, seems to be when he meets his guru, Sri Yukteswar.
Ah, yes. That relationship is foundational.
It totally is. It leads him into this really rigorous training in Kriya Yoga.
And for listeners who might not know, Kriya Yoga is it's a specific meditation technique involving breath work designed to speed up spiritual growth.
Right. And then you get to these chapters, encounters with saints and mystics.
Oh, yeah. That's where it gets really interesting for a lot of readers, isn't it?
Totally. He describes these incredible events, saints levitating, people living without food, even manifesting objects out of thin air.
It's quite something. It's this mix of biography, but also, mystical lore.
Yeah.
And it kind of prompts you, the reader, to consider these stories. I mean, whether you take them literally or maybe more symbolically.
Right.
They definitely paint a picture on a world where maybe divine laws work differently than the physical laws we're used to.
It certainly challenges your perspective. What do you think makes those accounts resonate so much, even if they sound, unbelievable on the surface?
That's a good point. I think it's partly because he presents them not as just like magic tricks, but as experiences tied to a higher state of consciousness.
Okay, so connected to the spiritual path itself.
Exactly. He makes them seem less like random miracles and more like potential outcomes of deep spiritual practice, almost, comprehensible within that framework.
That makes sense. And beyond these specific stories, the book explores some really big themes.
Definitely.
The core one, as you mentioned earlier, is that intense longing Yogananda had for direct divine experience. He finds that God realization isn't just some abstract idea,
Right.
but the actual goal of life, the purpose.
The ultimate purpose, yeah. And tied right into that, especially important in Eastern spirituality, is the guru-disciple relationship.
Well, absolutely. His bond with Sri Yukteswar is portrayed as crucial.
It really is. It's shown as vital for making real spiritual progress.
Yeah.
It guides the whole journey.
And building on that, another theme that really jumps out is this connection between science and spirituality.
Yes. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
He was quite ahead of his time, wasn't he?
He seems to have been. He connects Eastern mysticism with concepts from Western science, even mentioning Einstein, touching on quantum ideas, metaphysics.
Mm-hmm. The study of reality itself.
Exactly. And his big point is that spirituality isn't just blind faith. It's something you can experience directly.
Experiential, verifiable through practice.
And totally compatible with reason. That's a powerful claim.
It really is.
All right.
And another theme that runs right through is the unity of religions.
Yes, he talks about that a lot.
He really emphasizes that fundamentally all true religions are pointing towards the same ultimate reality. He often quotes Jesus, Krishna, figures from different traditions.
To show that common ground.
Precisely. To demonstrate that underlying unity.
It's quite a unifying message. Now, let's talk about the style of the book itself, how it's written.
Okay.
Yogananda's writing is, it's quite poetic, wouldn't you say? Ornate sometimes.
Definitely evocative. He uses a lot of vivid imagery. Sanskrit terms pop up.
Right, you notice those.
And metaphors, analogies from both Indian and Western backgrounds.
And even though it's deeply devotional, very spiritual, there's often this touch of humor, a very human quality to it.
That's true. That helps, I think.
Yeah, it kind of grounds all the mystical stuff, makes it more relatable.
It does, but it's also fair to say, for some readers today, the language might feel a bit dated, maybe a little overly elaborate, especially near the beginning.
I could see that. It has a certain formality sometimes.
Yeah. And that ties into expectations. If you go in expecting a straightforward, conventional autobiography,
Like a simple life story.
the mystical accounts,
Yeah.
the focus on spiritual phenomena, that can be tough to digest. It's really more of a spiritual testimony than a typical personal history.
That's a really good distinction. So how do you think someone who's maybe skeptical about, levitating saints and things like that, how can they still get something valuable from it?
Well, I think one way is to see those accounts perhaps less as literal objective reports
Okay.
and more as maybe illustrations,
Yeah.
demonstrations of higher spiritual principles or laws that Yogananda believed operated beyond our everyday understanding.
So even if you're skeptical, they can work as allegories, symbols of consciousness expanding.
Exactly. Symbols of potential, perhaps. And speaking of impact, the cultural footprint of this book is just enormous.
It really is. It was one of the very first major Indian spiritual texts to become super popular in the West. That's a big deal historically.
A landmark moment, really.
And get this, the people who read it and recommended it. Steve Jobs apparently read it every single year.
Wow, every year.
George Harrison of the Beatles was a huge advocate, had it nearby when he passed. Even Elvis Presley was known to be a reader.
That's quite a list. It
Yeah.
really shows how it crossed boundaries.
Totally unexpected mix, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It highlights that cross-cultural appeal you mentioned, bridging East and West with, well, a certain grace and intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
And it undeniably helped lay the groundwork for the whole modern yoga movement we see everywhere now in America and Europe.
I can draw a line there.
You really can.
Yeah.
And it introduced Kriya Yoga, that specific practice we talked about, to literally millions of people.
Aimed at accelerating self-realization, as he put it.
Right. It's this unique first-person window into Indian mysticism, into yogic science. But of course, we should also mention the criticisms.
Sure.
Skeptical readers, as we discussed, are likely to struggle with the supernatural parts.
Yeah.
Some might just see them as, fantastical stories or maybe exaggerations.
And that's fair, depending on your worldview, I suppose. But maybe that's where the layers of meaning come in handy.
I think so.
So, kind of circling back to wrap up our deep dive here, Autobiography of a Yogi really stands out as a potentially transformational book if you're open to its core message. It blends storytelling, metaphysics, mysticism. It's this really unique package describing a journey of spiritual awakening.
It is unique.
And whether you read it as literal truth or maybe as an allegory or even just a philosophical exploration, it clearly keeps inspiring people generation after generation.
It does. And it offers this profound peek into a reality, or at least a perception of reality, that's far beyond the everyday grind. It challenges us.
Right.
Which leads us to a final thought for you, our listener, to sort of ponder.
Okay.
How might engaging with these kinds of deeply personal accounts of profound spiritual experiences, like Yogananda's, how might that challenge or maybe even expand your own ideas about reality, about consciousness, and about the true potential of human experience?